The office where Julian Crane greeted the dawn had nothing in common with his public headquarters. This wasn't the showy, minimalist space where he'd coaxed Rick Harper into taking the job, nor was it the panoramic, windswept rooftop of the tower. No, this place, sealed within the bedrock beneath the Citadel's foundation, felt more like the command bridge of a battle cruiser. The stark, utilitarian style of the warships of his youth had stayed with him forever. Once, 200 years ago, he himself had dreamed of commanding such a vessel. Crane's activity might have seemed eccentric. Leaning back in his command chair, he tilted his head and sketched something on a large holographic display. The light pen in his hand left a cascade of fine, colored lines that wove into something vaguely familiar, like a human face seen from an impossible angle, like an ant trying to view the Mona Lisa through a kaleidoscope. "There we go," Crane muttered, setting the pen aside. His gaze darted to a side monitor. There, on the scorching yellow sand of the training ground, stood Rick and the Ursid. A moment ago, they had been locked in a brutal sparring match. Now, Harper was methodically, segment by segment, removing his armor and neatly placing it on the ground. Next to his silhouette on the screen, a red dot pulsed, a mental sensor redlining with stress. "Close up! Audio!" Crane commanded, and the chair silently rolled him toward the screen. The cameras obediently focused on Rick's face. "What are you up to, kid?" Crane asked himself. "Why did you set the scourge on us?" Rick asked, shedding the last piece of his armor. The Ursid never took its eyes off him, its strange diamond-shaped pupils narrowing to blades. "It was a tactic. We learned from you humans. Divide and conquer. You never really learned." "No." With the same deliberate slowness he'd used to discard his armor, Rick pulled his white tunic over his head. He stretched, and muscles of steel rippled under his skin. "Ursid, you said you were an advisor to the Toads during their campaign in the TriStar system. Maybe even took part in the landings." "Perhaps," the Ursid said, slightly spreading its fingers. Its left paw was missing a claw, making it vaguely resemble a human hand. "I'm from there, Ursid, from the TriStar system. It used to be called the Three Sisters. Yeah, the sisters bickered, but we never coveted other worlds. We were on the edge of the sector, and the scourge hit us first." "How ironic," the Ursid rumbled. "There were too many of them. They just swept our defenses aside. The cruisers from Earth didn't make it in time. The children and some of the women were evacuated on cargo ships. We had an excellent merchant fleet. Most made it to Aethel. 200 million refugees, Ursid. They hated us on Aethel, and other worlds wouldn't take us. Our fathers burned in the fights with the Toads. Not the best way to die. And the Three Sisters were scorched with meson torpedoes. There was no other way. Now they're just dead rocks." "A buffer zone." Rick fell silent, running a hand over his cheek as if checking for a clean shave. "You know, I cried when the last Scourge world burned to the ground. Cried because I never got my revenge. Took too long to grow up." "My orders are to leave you alive," the Ursid cut in. "Julian Crane needs you." "I know." "Ursid, your mother ate carrion and bathed in sewage ditches. Your father was the last in line. Your children will be digging ditches in the galactic backwater." The claws on the Ursid's paws shot out with a predatory click. Its voice became thin, like the whistle of a flute. "You're playing with fire, human. Duty is duty, but honor has not been abolished." Julian Crane leaped from his chair. In 2 bounds he was at the center of the bridge, where the air shimmered with the rainbow haze of a teleporter. "Arabia! Training ground!" he yelled, pulling a tiny, toy-like pistol from his pocket. Crane knew he wouldn't make it, and he didn't. Rick was sitting on the sand next to the Ursid's corpse. The dead body had lost all its power and majesty. From a few feet away, it could be mistaken for the carcass of some northern bull. It was curled up, instinctively assuming the posture of a four-legged beast. Its snarling maw was pressed into the sand. Only 2 deep furrows, drawn under its motionless paws, betrayed the fury of its final attack. "What happened here, kid?" Crane asked, holstering his pistol. Rick turned slowly. Only then did Crane see the long, though not deep, wound on his stomach. "I believe he had a heart attack," Rick answered softly. "Fortunately, he had already taught me everything he thought necessary." Crane bent down, lifted the ursid's head, and looked into its dead eyes. Its face was frozen in surprise. "A heart attack, you say?" Poor Agish truly believed there was only one way an unarmed human could kill an ursid. Never got around to convincing him otherwise. "Here, Rick." He tossed him his light gray jacket. Rick silently pressed the fabric to his wound. "How do you know about the pressure points?" "I had a friend who went through the Great War." "I see. Agish was a valuable asset." "Then he deserves a ceremonial funeral." "An ursid killed by a human? You're joking, Rick." "Did anyone say anything about murder? Or a human?" "I suppose not. Do you even realize what you said to him?" Rick shook his head. "You invited him to eat your excrement." "Is that all?" Rick said, getting up from the sand. He tossed Crane's jacket onto the corpse. The fabric happened to cover Agish's face. Without knowing it, Rick had humiliated the ursid even in death. Whatever Crane thought about the incident, he never brought it up again. 2 doctors, looking like kids but working with the precision of veterans, sealed Rick's wound and gave him a series of injections with unknown drugs. A thin layer of medical spray completed the procedure. "Will it hold for a couple of days?" Crane inquired. "It'll hold for a couple of years," one of the medics shrugged. The familiarity only reinforced Rick's opinion that both kids had recently been through the Continuum. Now Rick was resting in his room. Twilight gathered outside the windows. Life in the tower followed its own rhythm. He was just starting to drift off when a silicate materialized in the room. In combat with organic life forms, ursids sometimes used poisoned claws, it announced instead of a greeting. "He didn't have time to poison them, and the doctors gave me some kind of antitoxin, but thanks anyway." "May I?" The silicate floated toward the couch and, before Rick could react, contorted its entire stone body and sat down next to him. Rick instinctively moved away. A palpable heat radiated from the silicate. "Let us honor the memory of the departed with silence," the guest pronounced solemnly. Rick remained silent for exactly 2 minutes. Then he asked, "So, is it hard to set up the screen?" "At close range, it's elementary. Unfortunately, you can't get close. Done. We are shielded from any eavesdropping." "Even from what Julian Crane himself uses?" "Yes." "And you're sure I have something to tell you?" "Yes." "Speak." "The ursids found your weak spot, Rockman. The structures that generate your force field are unstable. Funny for a race obsessed with balance and stability, isn't it? A sound of a specific frequency resonates with them. After that, a light push is enough to turn you into an immobile, helpless, but still thinking stone. What is this sound? I can't reproduce it. You need the throat of an ursid for that. Perhaps you are lying. Perhaps. Why did you tell me this? Humans have rarely fought you. You live on planets we wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. The human commonwealth has its interests. The Silicate Foundation has its own. They don't overlap. And if a war does start, we're not going to field a choir of opera singers against you. A laser pistol will even the odds, and a fusion blaster will give me a huge advantage. You have to be an ursid, obsessed with brute force, to seek an edge in hand-to-hand combat with silicates. "This uncertainty was oppressing us, Rick," the silicate whispered. "We do not tolerate ambiguity." "I figured. So what do you have for me in return?" "Julian Crane bought the Continuum prototype from the architects for 2,500 creds. Well, for that time, the price was just as ridiculously low. And a year and a half later, the architects completely sealed off their sector of space. That's all. I have said what I can. My debt to Crane will last for a very long time." The air shimmered as the protective screen vanished. The silicate rose into the air. The couch smelled of singed leather. "We have honored the memory of the fallen, with the silence he deserved. And now, Rick, Aiden Crane is waiting for you. It's time for you to work." Entering Aiden's apartment, Rick was reminded of his own orphanage. The entire J block of the New Dawn Collective, with its tiered dormitory, classroom, and recreation area, would have fit entirely into one of the younger Crane's rooms. This oval hall, for instance, its walls hung with tapestries depicting dark, unsettling scenes. Rick felt no complex about it. Ethel had given him the only thing it could, life. He was simply remembering his childhood. "Hey, Daddy," Aiden said. He was sitting on the floor in a lotus position with his eyes closed, hands resting on his knees. "Wrong address, it's me," Rick said, sitting down next to him. "I know it's you, but we have to get into character, right?" "Right. Hey, son." Aiden, without opening his eyes, winced. "I doubt you call me son. More like kid." "No way." "All right, let's think. You're a bore, always complaining, you count every cred, and you're trying to mold me into a model merchant. You call me son, or by my name." "Fine, son. Does your name have a short form?" "What?" Aiden opened one eye. "When they revive us, I'm supposed to show a storm of emotions. According to the legend, this is our first continuum. No matter how much of a hard-ass I am, saying my son Aiden is over the top. What did your father call you? You know, when you—" "Son," Aiden smiled and closed his eyes again. "Right. Okay, we'll figure it out on the spot. Where do we live?" "Endora. We have a house on the ocean. 2 stories, a vineyard, a landing pad for the sky speeder. You keep the ship at the public spaceport. It's farther than Endora Prime, but a lot cheaper. You finish the mandatory course at some second-rate private college, after which I decided to personally handle your education. My mother manages all the finances for the Shaw and Son Company and never flies with us. You cheat on her periodically, and you have a regular mistress on Rugh. I pretend I don't know anything." "Works for me," Rick nodded. "That's the official part sorted. Now let's talk about what's not in the instructions." "You're paranoid," Aiden noted with obvious pleasure. "Of course, it's my job. What's your favorite food?" "Tazian jelly." The son of a small-time merchant couldn't have even tasted it. "Why not?" "We shipped that jelly from Tazia to Earth for Julian Crane himself, and we ate the 2% written off as transport losses." "Let's say. What don't you like?" "Cheese sandwiches." "Why?" Rick was caught off guard. "I just don't like them." Rick nodded. He struggled to his feet, stretching his stiff legs. Aiden remained as still as a statue. A few questions not related to the legend. "What is this room?" "A meditation hall. Why do you ask?" "Just because. Do you have any brothers?" "Not that I'm aware of." "Have you ever been off Earth?" "That's the 3rd question." "All right, let's continue." Rick walked a circle around Aiden. "Are you afraid of the dark?" "No." "Heights?" "No." "Death?" Aiden turned his head. Their eyes met. "Of course not, Dad," the boy said in an icy tone. "Are you afraid of me?" "When you're high on shadow." "Never tried it." "All merchants smoke shadow. Over there, behind the curtain, in the bone box, there's a pack. Take it." Behind the curtain, there were many interesting things. The box with Shadow, a dozen other boxes, a disassembled but operational communicator, and an activated security drone whose lenses tracked Rick's every move. Rick stuffed the tightly packed bag of narcotics into his pocket and returned to Aiden. Do I smoke it often? When things are going badly. Rarely. Do I like to lecture? You love it. Did I tell you about the birds and the bees? Aiden broke into a smile. Yeah, when I turned 10, you called me into your office, the cockpit, and said, Aiden, you're becoming a man and you need to learn about certain aspects of life. When a man and a woman love each other and want to have a little baby, they do all sorts of interesting things. Do I really have to be such an idiot? Rick asked. Yes, always and in everything. You want me to act natural, don't you? Fine, your turn. Do you shave? Every day, except for the days I'm high on Shadow. Do you snore? Sometimes. Are you messy when you think no one's watching? Naturally. Aiden did a backflip and landed lightly on his feet. Rick, you're not so bad. Want some juice? Or wine? A glass of yellow Qatarian. A glass of yellow Qatarian and a glass of orange juice, Aiden said to the empty air. Damn, if only we had more time. We definitely work well together. We will work well together. We don't have a choice. Let's continue. Rick was woken at dawn. He had only gone to bed a couple of hours ago, and the awakening was brutal. Julian Crane is waiting for you. The man who entered his room clipped. He was wearing power armor with its defensive field activated, and the holster of his Hornet plasma pistol was unstrapped. Rick preferred not to argue with people like this. He dressed silently and walked out. The man in armor, his face hidden by a sealed helmet, walked behind, guiding him with touches of his hand. 2 corridors and 3 wormholes, with another armored guard joining them after each one, led them to an office Rick didn't recognize. The room did indeed resemble a cruiser's bridge, both in design and in the amount of equipment. Crane walked out to meet them. The situation has changed, Rick. And now I'm under arrest? Crane frowned. What gave you that idea? Nick, I didn't order you to bring Rick under guard. Sorry, Mr. Crane, we were just providing security. Crane put an arm around Rick's shoulders and dismissed the guards with a nod. Everyone's on edge, Rick. We caught a spy, one of my employees. He might have passed something along, I don't know. He had to be eliminated. Interrogate him. He's dead. I thought all your people had Continuum. Of course, but he wasn't human. What a shame, Rick agreed. The operation begins immediately. Have you coordinated your legend? As if you don't know, Crane, Rick snapped. Easy, kid, easy. Crane's gaze instantly turned to ice. I hired you for an extremely important mission, and I expect flawless execution. You will deliver my son to sanctuary, alive and unharmed. Not a hair on his head will be touched. As a last resort, you will kill him yourself. And remember, Rick, immortality, an eternity of pleasure or an eternity of agony. Remember. Dad? They turned simultaneously. Rick was already in character. Aiden Crane was no longer the son of a god. Before them stood an ordinary teenager in worn-out blue jeans, a plaid shirt 2 sizes too big, and beat-up sneakers. A dozen Planet Crest pins glittered on his shirt, a timeless kid fashion. Rick remembered how a year ago during a cruise on the Southern Cross, a boy steward had pinned a new one to his uniform after every new planet. Are you sure about Rick, son? For the most part, yeah. Aiden hesitated. Yes, Father, he'll do his best. The little bastard, Rick thought calmly. He stepped toward Aiden and ruffled his hair. Time to go, son? Time to go, Dad. Well done, Crane said sourly. Sounds convincing. Everything will be perfect, Mr. Crane, Aiden promised, taking Rick's hand. Me, Aiden, and Rick, to the simulator. Crane didn't bother hiding his irritation. The world around them blinked and changed. The console-filled bridge vanished, replaced by a tiny, empty room. Walls of rough stone and a single steel door. "Go," Crane pushed Rick toward the door. "I don't know how much time you'll have, but it's all going to be real." The door opened at his touch. He found himself in an airlock, a cramped, cylindrical cabin with 2 hatches. So, the right leads to the cargo hold and engines, the left to the living quarters. A small freighter, about 150 tons of useful cargo, one of hundreds of thousands buzzing around the galaxy. A couple of spacesuits in bags, a photograph taped to the wall. A pretty woman wagging her finger with a scribble across the photo. "Check for a planet before you step out." Yeah. A greeting from the caring Mrs. Shaw to her wayward husband and disobedient son. Old Man Crane had prepared thoroughly. Rick glanced through the open outer hatch. Julian Crane, his hand on his son's shoulder, was saying something to him. A fragment of the sentence reached Rick. "And remember, I'm always with you. If the situation gets out of control, come back. I love you, Aiden, and I believe in you. Don't rush. We have an eternity ahead of us." Turning away, Rick adjusted the bags on the spacesuits. The small one was almost new. The large one was noticeably worn, but in excellent condition. The hatch hissed shut. "Thinking of splashing out on a new suit, son?" Rick asked without turning around. "If the trip is a success." "Of course, Dad." Aiden's eyes were dry. But Rick had seen too many tears that flow somewhere deep inside. "You look down, Aiden. What should we do?" "Let's just go to sleep. We've checked the cargo." Rick nodded. "Many rookies think that dying in your sleep is the easiest way. How wrong they are. You usually manage to wake up." He slept, or rather, finished sleeping, surprisingly peacefully. 7 deaths under his belt. That's experience. Besides, Rick was sure Julian Crane wouldn't let them die so banally. Aiden, it seemed, didn't understand that. "Dad, wake up!" Cursing everything, Rick peeled his eyelids open. There's nothing worse than interrupted sleep, especially when you're waiting to die. But Aiden, like all kids, was in a hurry to live. And in his understanding of life, death fit in quite organically. "Waking me for nothing again," he muttered. "What happened?" The freighter's living module was tiny. 2 pilot seats integrated into a horseshoe-shaped control panel and fold-down bunks along the walls. The entire front wall was one big screen, a stupid trend in Rick's opinion. Watching the stars through a window was foolish, and landing a ship by it was pure suicide. "Something's wrong with the engines," Aiden said guiltily. Rick got up, catching himself moving with genuine speed. He was starting to believe in the flight of a ship sitting on the ground. That was good. There really was something wrong with the engines. On the small monitor for the warp drive, supposedly installed on the freighter, the power figures for the focusing field were jumping erratically. The autopilot's warning indicator flickered between red and green. Rick tapped the display with his finger. Strangely, the numbers obediently settled at a normal reading. "What the hell?" he grumbled. "Maybe we should just drift," Aiden asked from behind him. "And lose a day recalculating coordinates? We might as well call a service crew and a patrol while we're at it," Rick shot back sarcastically. The field power jumped again to an impossible value. The ship shook noticeably. Aiden gave a pathetic smile. "Okay, either the generator is failing or the control unit is lying." Rick turned. "The toolbox, detectors, spare boards. Aiden, replace the central processor in the engine's control panel. I'll hold the controls from the console." Aiden didn't move. "What's wrong with you, son?" Rick roared. "Yes, Dad." Aiden snatched the plastic box with the processor from his hands and rushed to the airlock. "And stop shaking! We bought the Continuum!" Rick yelled after him. So this was the disaster Crane had promised? Humane. An instant explosion. But could a warp drive dropping out of warp really blow up the whole ship? "What are you planning, Julian Crane?" Aiden ran through the airlock and threw open the door to the engine room. At that exact moment, the power readings on the console dropped to 0. A siren wailed in unison with the dull thud of an explosion. Rick was thrown face first into the control panel. Something nearby cracked with a crunch. And then came the hungry hiss of air escaping into a vacuum. Son of a bitch, Rick thought without malice, lifting his head. Blood gushed from a cut on his forehead. His liver ached, a souvenir from the Ursid. His ears started to pop. Then he saw Aiden, or rather, what was left of him. Bloody scraps of clothing and something else. He didn't want to look closer. For his son, Crane Sr. had chosen a quick death. For him, a realistic one. On unsteady legs, Rick staggered toward the airlock. The gravity was still working. He had to at least try, futilely, to get to a spacesuit. Rick hadn't expected even this from Crane. The airlock was torn in half. Space breathed through the ragged hole. Absolute blackness, stitched with myriads of stars, and the streamlined hulk of the cargo bay slowly drifting away. Blue sparks of static electricity danced along the engine nacelle. Son of a bitch! Son of a bitch! Son of a bitch! Rick thought helplessly, feeling his eyes start to bulge from the pressure inside. Then a bloody veil fell over the world. More than anything in the world, Rick Harper hated children. Whether this was an echo of his own childhood in the New Dawn Collective on Ethel, he didn't know. But the fact remained, he never stayed on one planet for more than 9 months. And on those planets that had undergone forced processing during the Great War and dutifully supplied cannon fodder for the Commonwealth, his visits never exceeded 4.5 months. Besides that, Rick didn't like being killed. Sometimes it was excruciatingly painful, and it always cost a fortune. And Rick needed money. He loved his Stingray-class courier ship, which required expensive maintenance. Women, who, fortunately, were cheaper, the wines of the Commonwealth and the Qatarian Syndicate, the smells of Vexian artisan workshops, and those exotic pleasures of other races that a human was capable of understanding and experiencing. Now his two main antipathies had converged at a single point. And the most disgusting part wasn't that a child was about to kill him because of a child, and in one of the most vile ways possible. The catastrophe was something else. Rick hadn't had time to renew his contract with the Continuum, and that, as everyone knew, was fatal. The hotel room was shabby enough not to attract professional thieves, but decent enough to deter petty crooks. The boy standing by his bed looked like one of the latter. How he'd gotten an electronic key to the room and a null-field scrambler to block the alarm remained a mystery. The weapon in his hand was simpler. Agonizers, the favorite toys of sadists and losers, were cheap. "Let's do this," Rick proposed, desperately trying to maintain his composure. "You lower the weapon and we'll talk, like adults." The boy smirked. "I'm not an adult." He certainly didn't look serious. A dark-skinned, black-haired kid of about 12 or 13. A bright pink silk shirt and short white pants made him look even more harmless. "Listen," Rick tried again, "even if you throw that thing out the window right now." The boy frowned slightly. "Even if you throw the agonizer away, I can't do anything to you. You can see." "I see. I can't talk when there's a weapon pointed at me." "And why would I need to talk to you?" the boy asked with mild surprise. Mentally, Rick praised all the gods known to him. The longer they talked, the less likely this little bastard was to pull the trigger. It's not so easy to kill a person you're talking to. Though, Rick wasn't sure if that rule applied to children. "You're going to kill me, right?" he clarified. The boy nodded silently. "Death by agonizer is the most horrific thing imaginable. Trust me, I know." "Killed someone?" the boy asked with interest. "I've been killed." The kid narrowed his eyes. He understood. So, Rick continued, his voice as confidential as possible, if you've decided to try this piece of junk on me, at least tell me why. That's not too much to ask, is it? True, the boy agreed with surprising ease. He walked to the chair by the wall, sat down, crossed his legs, and placed the agonizer on the armrest. Unfortunately, he wasn't risking anything. Rick lay on the bed, naked and utterly helpless. A thin, silvery web pinned his body to the bed and the wall. The boy had placed the spray can on the table, presumably in case the procedure needed to be repeated. So, how did I wrong you, pal? Rick carefully turned his head to keep the threads from cutting into his skin. Are you a robber? Congratulations, you've got talent and luck. I'll tell you where the cash is and the code for my credit chip. I'm leaving tomorrow, so I won't come looking for you, and your police. The boy's face twisted. I'm not a robber, and you're not flying anywhere. The fact that you flew in is enough. A moment of silence hung in the room. Then Rick asked, very quietly, Who was that girl to you? My sister. Pal, it was an accident. I was landing on spaceport territory. I touched down within my assigned zone. But you didn't land in the circle. You killed her. On purpose. I know what you told the controller. I hate kids. These little whores are always getting under the thrusters. Many people saw your landing. You swerved right over the field to hit Lily with your repulsor beam. The boy's voice grew thin, cracking, and Rick realized with horror he was psyching himself up to shoot. I didn't see her. Believe me, why would I? Right, you were just dancing in the air, the boy threw back with contempt. Rick choked on the lie he had prepared. How could he explain to this slum kid that he really was dancing? How to convey the weight of the pilot's helmet, the blue of the sky that had become his element, and the weightless ship that he had become himself? The roar of the gravity drives, the rush of air, the intoxication of flight. Yes, he was dancing. And he wasn't looking at the concrete plane where a girl who had bribed the guards was waiting for his ship to be the first to run to the ramp and offer the cheapest drugs on the planet, herself as a guide, or just herself. He was dancing. And the repulsor beam had grazed her, slamming her into the concrete, turning her into a bloody mist, into that grayish-brown stain he saw when he stepped out of the ship. Kid, my autopilot was malfunctioning. I switched to manual, but the ship lurched. You're lying, the boy cut him off mercilessly. Everyone at the port knows your Stingray is in perfect condition. He picked up the agonizer, carefully took it off safety, and approached the bed. Listen, Rick said, feeling an icy chill run down his skin. I have Continuum. You can't kill me forever, you understand? I'll come back and do things to you that will make an agonizer seem like a mercy. You're lying. The boy flinched, almost imperceptibly. No, look at my body, not a single scar. People in my line of work don't look like this. I was revived a month ago, you get it? The boy wasn't interested in his profession, which Rick had vaguely hoped for, but he did catch the end of the sentence. If you were revived a month ago, you might not have renewed your contract yet, he said thoughtfully. I'll take that risk, Rick screamed. Mentally, of course. He had come to Cygnus X1 to renew his immortality. It was much cheaper here than on Proxima Centauri, where he'd been killed last time. He loved the money that made life pleasant, and now he was losing that life. At least, he pleaded quietly, don't kill me with the agonizer. Your sister died instantly. Don't torture me. And then, maybe, I won't be too zealous with my revenge. The boy looked Rick over carefully, studying the muscles in his neck with particular interest, and he shook his head. I'm not sure I can strangle you. In the closet, on the second shelf from the bottom, there's a plasma pistol, a Hornet Marine model, officer issue. The money and credit chip are there too. Access code is Sierra 32 Tango. It's all yours. Just kill me with that." "All right." The boy, tucking the agonizer into his belt, walked to the closet. Rick glanced at his left hand. The web had been applied poorly, only catching his fingertips. From his shoulder to the second knuckle, his arm was free. Biting his lip until he tasted blood, he yanked his arm with all his might. The polymer thread indifferently accepted its sacrifice, tearing off the last 2 knuckles of 4 fingers. The thumb was intact. Good. "How did you get into the hotel?" Rick asked to distract him. "Told the clerk I was a rent boy," the kid explained, carefully opening the closet. "Paid him. Hey, there's only money here, no pistol." "Here it is," Rick said, pulling his hand from under the pillow. Blood spurted from the stumps of his fingers in thin fountains. The ribbed barrel of the Hornet was shaking wildly. The boy spun around, raising his agonizer, and froze, mesmerized by the sight of the bloody jets. "I hate kids. Too bad I didn't see your sister. I would have killed her on purpose." The stump of his index finger pressed the trigger. As the raw flesh touched the metal, a sharp jab of pain made Rick cry out. His hand trembled, and the thin red beam slid over the boy's shoulder. Now he was the one screaming, either from fear or because Rick had actually grazed him. The boy ducked, and the agonizer bloomed with a cone of shimmering green light. The light harmonized surprisingly well with the splatters of blood. It's hard to miss with a loser's weapon. When the neural activator field touched Rick, he forgot about the pain in his hand. He became pain itself. It had happened before, but back then his Continuum was paid for, and he could, at least, believe that he would get his revenge. Rick didn't scream for long. A second later, he no longer had the strength to. After a minute and a half of unbearable agony, he died, blind, deaf, and sliced to pieces by the web he had thrashed in until the very end. Death is the final adventure. There's nothing new in resurrection. It's like any other awakening. First, Rick saw light, then a lumpy gray tower hanging over him, motionless, almost lifeless. Though the debate over whether the word life could be applied to silicates had been raging for centuries. "Name?" A voice emanated directly from the gray surface. Ignoring the question, Rick sat up. The silicate didn't interfere. That race rarely moved, unless it was about to kill. The room was painfully familiar to him, a resuscitation module of the Continuum Corporation. Except the screen on the wall, which usually displayed the planet's name, was dark. Rick was lying on a white disk, 2 meters in diameter, a molecular assembler that had just recreated his body, new and healthy as it had been recorded in the database 17 years ago. Above him hung the intricate structure of a Continuum emitter, which had just poured all his childhood grievances, youthful follies, and adult crimes into his new brain, everything that constituted the personality of Rick Harper. They revived him, even though his contract wasn't paid? Chapter 3. The voice seemed to seep from the very surface of the silicon figure. No lungs, no vocal cords, just the vibration of tense muscles, creating an eerie polyphonic whisper. It was like a chorus of ghosts asking questions. "Name," the silicate repeated. There was no impatience in its tone, only cold, hard fact. Rick Harper. Affiliation? The Commonwealth. Code. Rick recited the numbers under his breath. 396311491. A personal code wasn't something you threw around lightly, not even here within the walls of the Continuum Corporation, which already knew everything about him. He glanced down at his left hand. All his fingers were there? So they hadn't patched him up. They had truly brought him back. But why the hell? Code confirmed. The silicate turned, a gesture of politeness, nothing more, and floated silently toward the exit. blue sparks crackled at the base of a massive gray column. A door slid open. For a second before disappearing, the silicate paused, and Rick saw something utterly impossible. The creature smiled. "Is someone going to explain what kind of circus is going on here?" Rick tossed the question into the emptiness, scanning the bas-reliefs on the walls. Flowers, naked men, naked women. The whole decadent display was starting to get on his nerves. "I will." Rick spun around. A man was sitting a few feet from the replication disc where he'd woken up. Better, the thought of having a heart-to-heart with a walking rock gave Rick mental heartburn. This guy, at least, looked almost friendly. The man appeared to be in his mid-40s, with a sleek, polished face and a body that had clearly never known hard labor. Even the loose gray suit couldn't hide his pampered softness. A clerk from Continuum? Clearly not a pawn, but not a king either. "Thanks for bringing me back," Rick said, swinging his legs off the disc. "Don't mention it." The words were simple, but the tone, Rick didn't like it at all. He decided to keep quiet. "So, what questions do you have?" Rick faltered. "Go on, don't be shy." The man was openly enjoying the situation. "Your Continuum wasn't paid up?" "Yes, I'm aware." "I have the funds. I've renewed my contract 6 times, and that no longer matters. You know the corporation's rules. Payment up front for 1 cycle only. Want to know why?" Rick just shook his head. This guy was the type who could lecture for hours on the ritual gastronomy of the Qatarian Syndicate or the tactical errors of the Great War. Fascinating, but almost always at the wrong time. When the architects sold the technology to very, very far-sighted people that we named Continuum, they made a single condition, a very strange one if you don't understand their psychology. They demanded that the technology be applied to any given individual only once. Do you understand, Rick? They value life, but they are terrified of immortality. So, what do you think we did? Rick shrugged. We, after all the papers were signed, legally proved to them that a resurrected person is a new individual. Yes, he's the legal successor, but still new. And this new person has every right to enter into a new contract. Brilliant, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant. Rick scanned the room for clothes and prepared to wait. The man laughed. All right, I got sidetracked. So, what did you want to ask? Where am I? Is this Cygnus X1? No, not Cygnus X1. You're on Earth. If he was hoping for a reaction, he got one. Rick never hid his emotions if it could stroke the ego of the person holding all the cards. But Continuum has no branches on Earth. This isn't a branch. This is a private Continuum. Rick forced a laugh and spread his hands. Great. Let's just say I didn't hear that and you didn't say it. The corporation has exclusive rights. Private resurrectors don't exist. That's where you're mistaken, Rick Harper. The exclusive right was transferred to a private individual, and that private individual founded the Continuum Corporation. I know who you are, Rick said quietly. You're Julian Crane, the owner of Continuum, the oldest man in the galaxy. Crane nodded. Well done, Rick. They'll bring you some clothes in a moment. We'll go to my summer office, have some wine. Consider this your lucky day. You've been given not just a new life, but an excellent job. Chapter 4. Crane's estate was scattered across the planet like shards of a broken mirror. Private properties on the shore of Lake Geneva, in the sweltering jungles of the Amazon, in the radioactive wastelands of the Baltics, and in the Siberian taiga, all connected into a single whole by wormholes. From the outside, if you could manage to peek behind the iridescent wall of the force field, you would only see absurd fragments of buildings, with balustrades leading to nowhere and galleries growing straight out of thin air. But from the inside, a completely different picture emerged. A mad fantasy multiplied by even madder money. After taking a funicular up the slope of Everest, one could ski right into the crystalline surface of Lake Baikal. After swimming a dozen yards in the icy water, you could surface on a scorching Cuban beach. And the journey to his Geneva Needle, a 300-meter tower, took at most a couple of minutes. Rick stood on an open platform at the very top. The wind howled, clawing at his hair with icy fingers, trying to tear him from his feet and cast him down into the dizzying void. An invisible force field surely surrounded this open-air office. But did a man who possessed an infinite supply of lives fear falling? That thought alone made Rick step back from the edge. Crane needed him, but his value could plummet right along with his body. A good employee shouldn't get dizzy. "How's the wine, Rick?" Rick took a sip. "Not bad, Mr. Crane. A rare vintage, but I prefer the blue wines of the Qatarian syndicate." "Perhaps you're right, but the yellow varieties are much healthier. They're easier on the liver and, extend your life." It sounded like a joke, but Rick said nothing. He twirled the antique crystal glass, its price likely rivaling the cost of resurrection, and watched Crane. The owner of Continuum sat at a simple wooden table with a matching glass. There was only one chair. It was either a show of casual indifference or a sign that no one was ever honored with sitting beside him at the pinnacle of his empire. "Impressive view?" Crane asked. "It's making my head spin," Rick muttered. "I prefer to look at the horizon." "A kaleidoscope, right?" Crane laughed. "I get it. Deserts, lakes, oceans, forests, all on one tiny patch of land. I don't need much, Rick. Why would I want the entire Red Sea or all of the Himalayas, even though I could buy them? A little piece of everything is enough for me. Moderation and variety. That's what keeps a long life interesting. You don't understand that yet, young man. You've come back 6 times, not counting this one. And each body lasted you 5 years at most. Such a waste. With your qualifications and income, you won't last long like that." "What do you want from me, Crane?" Rick asked wearily. "A gifted life is too high a price for a lecture. I need you to die for me. This time, for good. Or," he smirked, "to gain eternal life. Depends on how lucky you get." Chapter 5. Far from here, Rick, far from Earth, and certainly far from Cygnus X1, where they finished you off. Crane stood at the very edge of the platform, looking down. Below, a patch of dark ocean was visible, a jagged line of forest, and squeezed between them an island of night. The planet is called Sanctuary. Never heard of it. I'm not surprised. A new, undeveloped world. But my interests require me to be there. Crane suddenly spat into the void. Rick barely suppressed a smirk. The gesture was completely at odds with the image of the omnipotent magnate. "It's a good thing you're not laughing, Rick. What you've already heard is a top secret, and I'll have to tell you much more, and trust you with much more. I'm taking a huge risk." He turned and squeezed Rick's shoulder. "Do you have any idea what it means to be the most powerful man in the galaxy? Billions of people hate me. Those who can't afford Continuum, those who went bankrupt paying for it, those who are choked up by my luxury. Billions of hating eyes, millions of hands ready to strangle me. I don't just pay for physical security. I maintain a staff of psi blockers to protect me from those who might possess telepathic abilities without even knowing it. Outside this residence, outside of Earth, they won't just kill me. They'll torture me for years until I'm a drooling idiot. And no Continuum will save me then. But I'm willing to take the risk." "You need a bodyguard?" Rick asked, unable to believe his ears. It's not that simple. If I disappear from these walls for even a day, everyone will know immediately. Competitors, enemies, 100 mice can easily take down one cat, and I am a very, very fat and lazy cat. I'll have to take a chance and entrust this matter to my son, and you, Rick Harper, a consummate professional, will accompany him. Consider me yours, Rick said. What's the difference? A job's a job. Though you could have just hired me. Are you kidding? And let everyone find out? Anyone who enters these walls becomes an object of intense scrutiny for dozens of corporations and governments, and anyone who leaves even more so. But you arrived here virtually, so to speak, and you'll leave the same way. I see. Rick forced a smile. I hope it's not painful? Certainly less painful than a blast from an agonizer. According to the Cygnus X1 police report, that's what they killed you with, right? Rick remained silent. I've waited a long time, Rick. I had about 100 candidates on my list. The best pilots, bodyguards, mercenaries. I needed one of them to die without having renewed their contract. You know the neural net in your head is always working. Whether Continuum is paid for or not, it does its duty. It broadcasts a complete imprint of your personality at the moment of death. From there, it's up to the corporation whether to delete that signal or upload it into a new body. You didn't renew your contract, so the regional office deleted the signal and your body's matrix. But I, at my private terminal, the only one in the entire Commonwealth, decided otherwise. And so, here you are again, my unfortunate friend. Officially, you no longer exist. Thank you, Rick said, this time sincerely. Don't thank me yet. You'll work off every muscle, every gland, and even the crap in your intestines that had to be recreated for a full build. If you deliver my son to Sanctuary, you'll get the grand prize, in addition to new documents and a very hefty bank account. Immortality, Rick. No matter how many times you're killed, your Continuum will be paid for by the corporation. A fair price? More than fair. I like your brevity. I'm an old man, even if this body is only 50. You'll have to forgive my rambling. But you're young and capable of great things. So I'd gladly provide you with a new body, but experience shows you'd be less effective in it. We'll have to take a risk. Tonight, all our branches will receive the matrices of 3 people, Mr. and Mrs. Shaw and their son. The 3 of us are going? No, only you and Aiden will be in the staged catastrophe. Your cover is a freelance trader hanging around the Commonwealth borders. The ship crashed, obviously due to sabotage. We'll fake the whole thing. We have a first-class simulator here. You see, viewing a client's memory is forbidden, but there are always curious techies. I hope they won't dig deeper than a few hours before your death. Did you view my memory? Rick! Crane threw up his hands theatrically. You may not understand this, but the one who sets the rules must play by them. Memory viewing is forbidden. If a single rank-and-file employee found out I was breaking my own laws, my reputation, my empire, it would all come crashing down. Besides, I don't give a damn which whore or mugger caught you at a bad moment. Your file is enough for me. 4 times you died protecting a client. Once in a fight you were sure to lose, and once by falling into a river while drunk. I was pushed, Crane. It doesn't matter. I hope the price I'm offering will keep you focused and make you forget about life's little pleasures for the sake of life itself. Of course, Mr. Crane. So, you'll be brought back. I don't know where, for your own safety. There's a 12% chance we're being watched even here in this citadel. Rick looked up at the cloudless sky. Young man, we have so many layers of protection that there's no difference between the basement and this roof. Anyway, you'll wake up. You'll buy a ship. Your credit will be limited to avoid suspicion. But don't worry, the account will be topped off as needed. Then, on to Sanctuary. Drop my son off in any safe location, and you're free. He'll take care of our family business. Sounds too simple, Crane. Only simplicity wins, Rick. Then let's talk guarantees. Crane frowned. What's the guarantee my Continuum will be renewed? What's the guarantee that as soon as we land on your precious sanctuary, Crane Jr. won't put a round in the back of my head? What's the guarantee you won't send a dozen hitmen after me since I know too much? Well, Crane smacked his lips like an old man. He paced along the edge of the platform and said with regret, "You're taking quite a risk, Rick. It's my job." For a second, Crane drilled him with his gaze. Rick fought the urge to look away, meeting his stare directly. Finally, Crane laughed. "A job, you say? And you judge my job, running a galactic corporation based on movies? Do you know that almost 200 years ago, when my firm was nothing more than an amusing novelty, my worst enemy bought a Continuum package, and soon after he died in a very unexpected accident? We had few clients back then. People didn't trust us yet, and the price of life after the Battle of 1,000 Suns seemed exorbitant. I personally supervised the resurrection process. I could have. Yes, I could have." Crane trailed off, staring into the distance. "We remained enemies for many years. He never forgot to renew his contract. Eventually, I bankrupted him. Then Marcos terminated the contract, got into his yacht, and set a course for the nearest star." "It could have just been a gesture of despair," Rick noted very gently. "You're not so dumb after all." "A gesture? Of course. But tell me, in all the mud they sling at me every hour on every info network, have you ever heard a single accusation of professional dishonesty?" Rick shook his head. "People don't just work for me for money or even for their lives. They work for me out of conviction. I don't betray my own." "All right." Rick suddenly felt drained by the argument. "Last question. How do you guarantee my integrity?" "Mine? Elementary. The neural net in your brain. If you betray me, sooner or later, no matter what hellhole you're hiding in, death will find you. And when you're brought back, believe me, it will be right here, in this house. By then, I will have assembled the best torturers money can buy. You will be tortured for eternity, Rick. It will be your own personal hell. Hundreds, thousands of years of torture. Pain will be your air, your food, your sleep. You will die and be reborn for new, more sophisticated pain. You will be given respites only to have suffering crash down on you with renewed force. I will hire writers to invent new torments and directors to turn it into a spectacle. I will pull sadists from penal colonies and cannibals from asylums. I will seek help from other races, and they will dig up archives from their wars with humanity. And sometimes, his voice dropped to a near whisper, you will be brought here, to the quietest, coziest place in my home, and I will remind you of this conversation. Julian Crane, master of life and death, stood before Rick Harper from the planet Aethel, a rootless adventurer with no family or name, and he spoke, very calmly and deliberately. When he finished, Rick spread his hands. You have a way with words, Crane. I'm yours forever. I never doubted it for a second. Crane shrugged. It's getting a little chilly. Let's go inside to the office. The last thing I need is to catch a cold. The floor beneath them descended silently. They were lowering in a black capsule of a force field, and Crane studied the man to whom he had just promised the greatest reward and the most terrible torments since the dawn of time. He was a god, a strange god of the Commonwealth, given the power to punish and pardon. A god who was afraid to take a step off his man-made Olympus. Does your son know how to fly small ships? Rick asked, as if the horrifying monologue had never happened. Not just small ones. Weapons? He's decent with handguns, good with ship-mounted ones, not so great with blades, all that exotic stuff. Physical condition? Crane grunted, patting his own soft belly. A lot better than me. He's in excellent shape for his age. Well, that's reassure. Rick looked up. How old is he, Crane? He was born 16 years ago, he began smoothly. Rick winced, but his expression was more relief than displeasure. But biologically, he's a little over 12. Chapter 6. What's the problem now, Rick? Crane paced his office. Whether for contrast with the rooftop platform or for some other reason, this one was ridiculously small. 5 by 5 meters, a desk, a chair, and a small sofa. Rick was sprawled on the sofa while the master of the house walked in circles. A father with his young son, what could be suspicious about that? You fly to sanctuary looking for new goods, drugs, or exotic animals? What's the issue? Crane, I'm telling you again, I've never worked with kids. I just don't damn like them. I know. I know about the New Dawn Collective on Ethel and about your whole crowd of kids evacuated from the TriStar system before the Scourge landed. I know about the attitudes, the grudges. The only thing I don't know is which of your peers forced themselves on you and which ones just dunked your head in a toilet. I know you were the weakest one. You put up with it for a long time. Then, one night, you knifed a couple of your tormentors and ran away. Joined a traveling circus? Rick froze, turning into a statue of ice. He just got unlucky. He was placed in a block with the boys from Pollux, one of the planets in the system. A clerical error. Castor and Pollux had been rivals for decades until the Scourge, hungry for living space, forced humanity to unite. The adults made peace. They flew warships together, worked in factories together, died together. But for the children, there was only one war left, with each other. He didn't realize he had jumped up, blocking Crane's path as he mused aloud. Of course, after those dark years, humane treatment from adults had an effect on your psyche. A good psychotherapist could have helped. Crane. Rick grabbed his employer by the lapels of his suit. I don't care if you're a god or the devil. I don't care about your crappy Continuum bought from naive architects. I don't care about the promised thousands of years of hell. You do not get to dig through my life. Crane looked down in bewilderment at Rick's hand, which was lifting him off the floor. Then he slowly raised his eyes. I'm sorry, Rick, he said, his voice suddenly trembling. For too long you were just an abstraction to me, one of the candidates. I couldn't help but thoroughly study those to whom I was entrusting my son's fate and a mountain of secrets. It's only natural. But I was harsh. I forgot that you're here, alive, and that you could be hurt. Please forgive me. I think I'm starting to understand how you got so far, Rick whispered, unclenching his fingers. Only then did it hit him what he'd done. He had raised a hand to a god, and the god had apologized. I hope you can manage your emotions. Crane sank onto the sofa and gestured for Rick to sit beside him. My son is not like the punks you dealt with. He's a kid. He's 16, Rick. He's 12 biologically. When I come back in this 30-year-old body, I can feel how the world changes. The psyche is just a random growth on top of the glands. Your son hasn't lost his knowledge, but he's not a young man anymore. He's a boy again, I'm sure of it. Why did you, the master of Continuum, so rarely make a matrix of his body? Do you remember having your matrix taken? Rick winced. 3% of people terminate the procedure and refuse Continuum. They refuse immortality, Rick, knowing they only have to endure it once. Half of my engineers are working on the problem of painless scanning. 200 years, 0 results. I love my son. I scanned him and implanted the neural net as soon as the doctors gave the okay. I did it again when he was 12. I didn't have the heart to make him go through it again. We agreed he would undergo the scan at 18, and that body would become his baseline. But the ocean, Rick. He drowned. A cramp seized his leg, and at that moment, Rick thought that even a god could be pitied, even knowing that a god didn't need pity. Crane was staring into the void again, into the black lace of his infinite memory. Do you know how drowning victims revive, Rick? They cough, trying to spit out water that isn't there. They claw at their chests because their healthy lungs are still on fire. Crane, I'm sorry, but is it wise to send a teenager? I have no one else to send, Rick. Servants can betray you, friends even more so. My wife, she's the best wife money can buy. She's the highlight of any party. A wonderful mother to Aiden. She even loves me, not my money, and she knows what can be discussed and what can't. But she'll faint at the first gunshot, and every other man will want to possess her. And you, for all I know, might forget about the promised torments and cheat on me. Crane roared with laughter. Get over it, Rick. Unfortunately, I only have one son. When you're immortal, you don't rush to have heirs. I can trust him, and he can handle it. You have a huge carrot and a very sturdy stick. Do we have a deal? What are the other details? You'll have 3 days. Learn the cover story, get into character, you'll train a bit. My instructors know a few amusing tricks. Bring Aiden to Sanctuary, and we're friends for life. And what if we're intercepted by your numerous enemies? Then, Rick, you will demonstrate all of your talents. And if they prove insufficient, you will kill my son, as painlessly as you can. He must not fall into their hands alive. Rick looked at Crane and said, I think I'll take the job. But what happens to me if I die? That will depend entirely on what my son has to say. Chapter 7. Rick slept surprisingly well. The suite of rooms assigned to him seemed endless, and he was too lazy to look for the bedroom with the promised gravity bed. The sofa in the library suited him just fine, and the fruit from the crystal bowl served as breakfast. It was his second time trying the finicky earth fruit, plums, and he decided they were quite edible. The silicate, the same one that had greeted him on the other side of life, brought a tray with a proper breakfast. Rick added a cup of strong coffee to his fruit and asked, I was promised an instructor. Is that you? The gray stone pillar ignored his sarcasm. Follow me. The instructor is waiting. Either Crane was a fan of long walks, or the silicate didn't see the need to use the internal transport system. They walked through deserted corridors, occasionally stepping out into the open air. Through a nocturnal jungle where the silence was shattered by the harsh cries of some birds, they emerged onto a sunset-drenched ocean shore. The silicate flew just above the water's edge, and the spray hissed as it hit its stone body. Rick, having kicked off his shoes, trudged along behind. A blond boy playing with a ball by the water watched them with a long, steady gaze. Crane Jr.? Rick asked the silicate. No. The ocean met a living hedge. At the gate, the silicate stopped. You go on alone from here. I am not permitted to see your instructor. We are in a state of war. Rick racked his memory, recalling everything he knew about silicates, and nodded. Right, I'll go alone. Can you answer questions? Sometimes. Why do you serve Crane? Silicates do not serve. Exactly. So why? I am repaying a debt. Ah, I see. The gray tower waited patiently. Can you tell me anything about Crane? What specifically? Anything. A ripple ran across the bumpy surface of the stone, and the invisible chorus whispered, He is like his home. Not very reassuring, is it? Rick chuckled, opening the gate. Thanks, Rockhead. He stepped onto the sand. Yellow sand stretched to the horizon, where the night streets of Geneva shone through the rainbow haze of the barrier. Here, however, the sun was at its zenith, and beads of sweat formed on Rick's forehead. Though it wasn't just the heat, he saw the instructor, an Ursid, one of the most powerful and dangerous races in non-human space. They resembled 2-meter-tall bears, except no bear could boast such lightning speed, fur as strong as steel wire, and a fully developed intellect. This Ursid was old. His dark brown fur was dull and curled in innocent ringlets. The teeth in his snarling maw were worn down. "Hello, Rick. Put on the armor. Ready?" His voice was surprisingly melodic, a random quirk of evolution that had so often misled humans during the first contact era. The armor lay on the sand. Dark blue, rough scales. Lightweight plastic armor for hand-to-hand combat. The enhancers were removed, but the medical unit blinked with a green light. "What's your name, old-timer?" Rick asked, snapping the connectors shut. The Ursid clicked his teeth. "My name is not for your ears. I am your instructor. Human Rick, do you value this body?" "It needs to last 3 days." Rick snapped the last segment into place and took a fighting stance. "I'm ready, Ursid." A blow to the stomach sent him flying back against the hedge. The med unit in the armor screamed, pumping Rick full of stimulants and painkillers. "That blow doesn't kill immediately," the Ursid explained, approaching. "In a couple of weeks, your liver will simply fail. A nasty surprise for the prisoners we released during the Great War." Getting up, Rick kicked the Ursid in the groin with all his might. The fur softened the blow, and his leg throbbed, but the beast still staggered back. "And we usually just castrated prisoners," Rick informed him, "or sterilized entire planets, right?" "I was on the planet the Reaper passed over," the instructor said. "Your kick is painful, but not very effective." Rick dodged the next blow. The Ursid circled him, kicking up sand with his clawed paws. Then, suddenly dropping to all fours, he charged at Rick. Rick leaped, flying over the gaping maw. Straddling the massive body, he delivered 2 short strikes to the sides, the kidneys, a weak spot for all races, and somersaulted onto the sand. The Ursid straightened up, running his paws over his sides. Humans usually don't even consider that an intelligent being might attack on all fours. "You look young. Did you fight against us?" "I like to watch old newsreels." "Your imperfect vision simplifies information recording." The Ursid made a grunting sound. "Why did you win that war? You are weaker than us and dumber than the architects. You're average." "We're average in everything." "Yes, what a shame the galaxy is ruled by mediocrity." This attack caught Rick by surprise. Pinned to the sand by a 200-kilogram mass, he couldn't even move. The Ursid's jaws opened, washing over Rick with a strange, unexpectedly pleasant smell, and moved toward his throat. A faint beep sounded the very moment Rick felt the touch of fangs. The Ursid roared and jerked its head back. He raised his right paw. A very ordinary human watch glinted through the fur. "You're lucky, human," he said, his tone softening. "You lasted 5 minutes. Now I'm not allowed to kill you." With unearthly grace, he rose. Rick lay there, staring at his would-be executioner. "Get up, Rick. Now I will teach you how a human can kill an Ursid. And remember, this knowledge is for you alone." "Can I ask a question?" "Speak. Why does your breath smell so good? I thought you guys preferred rotten meat." "It's a breath freshener, you idiot. Every intelligent race practices hygiene." "Makes sense." Rick got up. His body ached. "All right, how do I kill you?" "The most vulnerable area of our race is the sigmoid gland region," the Ursid began in a low voice. If you draw an imaginary line from my genitals to my right eye, you'll find a spot right in the middle that isn't protected by muscle. Chapter 8. Crane invited Rick to dinner. After listening to the silicate's brief instructions on etiquette, Rick winced and stood up. Ignoring the frozen stone pillar, he undressed and stared grimly at his reflection in the mirror. The armor didn't protect against bruises, and certainly not against a blow to the liver, if the Ursid was to be believed. Ursids are the best warriors in the galaxy, the silicate said tonelessly. Better than you? Rick touched his shoulder and hissed quietly in pain. Probably. They found a way to kill us in close combat. Oh yeah? How's that? Rick asked, interested. I wouldn't say, even if I knew. I'll have to ask him. Lie down on the floor. Rick gave the silicate a surprised look, but didn't argue. He stretched out on the carpet, and the silicate slowly loomed over him. A heavy, pressing wave passed through his body. Gravitational massage, the silicate explained, swaying. You'll feel better. We can do more than just kill with our fields. Rook didn't suffer from bad memories. But for some reason, the spaceport on Cygnus X-1 flashed before his eyes, and a bloody stain about 50 yards from the ship. Stupid little bastards always running under the engines. Thanks, that's better, he said, rolling out from under the silicate. Will Crane Jr. be at dinner? Probably. Rick got dressed, an expensive suit, a wide, shimmering tie, and exceptionally uncomfortable shoes, and followed the silicate. He felt a mild curiosity mixed with annoyance, as he always did before meeting a client he couldn't refuse. A professional should have the right to choose, damn it! Do you have a desire to ask questions? What? Oh, right. Do you wear clothes? I am clothed, the silicate replied with dignity. Rick choked, but managed to hold back a laugh. My turn now. The silicate slowed to walk beside him. If humans gain ultimate power, what will they do? I don't follow, Rick answered honestly. They had left the tower and were heading toward a small round pavilion in the distance. The path led through a pine grove, past some ridiculous stones arranged in a circle, and a tiny corvette from the Great War era fused into a granite pedestal. Let me rephrase. If the Commonwealth's power grows immeasurably, how will humanity's policies change? We'll just stop paying attention to you. We'll stop taking you into account. Would you do any different? The silicate remained silent. Then, tilting toward the corvette, it said, During the Great War, Julian Crane served in the freelance hunter squadrons. They had no regulations, no orders. We never understood how to fight a completely disorganized enemy. Crane is a brave man, Rick said loudly. I agree. But many say his ship is too well preserved. The engines are worn out, but the armor is intact. And most curious of all, Crane returned from his last mission with a non-functioning onboard computer. We have arrived. I do not consume organic food, but I wish you a pleasant dinner. Describing a graceful arc, the silicate flew back. Rick stood for a moment, studying the ancient little ship, and then opened the door to the pavilion. He had an organic body that demanded food, and a ravenous appetite stirred up by his training. Chapter 9. Inside, the wooden pavilion turned out to be a stone castle. The enormous hall reminded Rick of the churches of the unified will he'd been dragged to as a child, evoking a nauseating mix of awe and disgust. His feet tangled in the dry reeds that covered the floor. The vaulted ceiling turned the rustling and his footsteps into a monotonous drone. Julian Crane sat at a round table, vigorously carving a huge piece of meat. Seeing Rick, he rose slightly. Have a seat, Rick. In honor of your morning exploits, we're having bear meat for dinner tonight. Rick couldn't help but smirk as he sat down. He had no doubt that Crane had been watching the training session. He was only curious about one thing. Was there a timer on the Ursid's wrist, or was it Crane himself who had given the signal to stop the fight? How did you like the instructor? I never would have thought Ursids could die of pleasure. The sigmoid gland? Oh yes, they die in ecstasy, provided you have the strength to pierce their hide. Hormones. The old bear didn't tell you, but his gland is protected not only by fat, but also by an implanted titanium plate. Otherwise, one of his students would have killed him long ago. And oh, how he loves that liver punch. It's his own invention, and God only knows how many human prisoners died while he was perfecting his technique. Pour some wine, Rick. Looking at the bottle of pale blue liquid, Rick shook his head. If you don't mind, Crane, I've started to be more careful with my liver. As you wish, Rick. Taking a sip of the viscous yellow wine, Rick nodded. Yes, the vintage was excellent. Crane, is your trainer really that old? The Ursid? Yes, he fought in the Great War. We're the same age. Their religion forbids Continuum, but they live a damn long time anyway. I know a lot about that war. They were allied with the Scourge, and they were responsible for suppressing our planetary bases. If it weren't for the Ursids, the Scourge wouldn't have lasted until the conflict in the Tri-Star system. Rick, let's not dredge up old grievances. It was big white frogs that burned your world, not big brown bears. I don't require you to love your instructor, but your sessions with him are necessary. One more day of training, and then you'll start rehearsing the cover story with my son. Speaking of which, here he is. Rick turned. From an open doorway, through which the sea splashed and sunlight streamed, Aiden Crane was walking toward them. His client, his fate. Aiden looked about 12. Bio years, Rick corrected himself. A dark-skinned, dark-haired teenager. And his face was painfully familiar to Rick. The very, very sharp pain of a blast from an agonizer. Rick was lucky. Crane wasn't looking at him. He was smiling, looking at his only heir. Though, do immortals even have heirs? The grimace on Rick's face lasted no more than a second. He had learned to survive a long time ago. Hi, Dad, Crane Jr. said. Hello, Mr. Harper. I hear you're just about the coolest bodyguard in the world. Think you can protect me? Now that Aiden was closer, the resemblance faded slightly. He was a bit younger than the kid who had killed Rick on Cygnus X1. Just a bit, but at his age, that made all the difference. His clothes, a green silk tracksuit, were tailored by a top designer, not stamped out in a factory from recycled materials. Despite his age, he was noticeably stronger and more muscular because he had money behind him, and with money came the best food, the best workout equipment, and the best trainers. And in his eyes, there wasn't the dull hatred of a cornered animal, but the steel confidence and authority of command. I know I'm not in the best shape. Things didn't quite go according to plan, Aiden continued, but I did just drown recently, so forgive me. So, you taking the job? Crane Sr. gave a crooked smile. Rick stood up and took a step toward Aiden. Yes, younger. Yes, stronger. A different look in his eyes. But everything else... Do you know what bodyguard means? Rick asked, praying to all the gods that his voice would sound steady. Of course. Lie down. Aiden remained standing, looking at him. A shove knocked him off his feet. If I say lie down, you fall, Rick said, looming over the boy. If I say jump, you jump, because I will never, except for today, say it for no reason. Every time, your life will depend on it. Jump! Crane Jr. sprang to his feet, straight from the floor, and stood frozen before Rick. You shouldn't hit my son, Crane's voice came from behind. And Rick felt it, with a chilling clarity, the barrel of a weapon aimed between his shoulder blades. Mr. Crane, Rick said without turning, you need a real bodyguard. I'm ready to work for you. But in a couple of days, I might not have a second to push Aiden out of the line of fire. If I can, I'll shield him, but it would be much better if he just drops, giving me a chance to shoot. Do you agree? And by the way, I didn't hit him. I pushed him. There's a difference. Perhaps, Crane replied evenly. Sit down, both of you. Dad, he's a good bodyguard, Aiden said nonchalantly, plopping into a chair next to his father and swinging his legs. He's cool. Aiden? Crane said with mild surprise. Rick grunted, turning his attention to the meat. I had a great hunt today, Aiden continued enthusiastically. Took down that tiger. Congratulations, Crane replied sourly. Dad, do people eat them? Who? Tigers? The liver, I think. Ugh, gross. I'm not eating it. Order another tiger, okay? All right, calm down, Aiden. Rick drank his wine, genuinely enjoying this circus. He liked this castle hidden inside a wooden shack. He liked Crane Sr.'s nervousness. You know, Rick, according to legend, this castle belonged to King Arthur, Crane said a little too quickly. And the table we're sitting at is the very round table. I gave the castle to my Aiden for his birthday. Never heard of King Arthur or the round table, Rick replied. An ancient legend, Crane said, perking up, from before the first interstellar flights. Dad, that's nonsense, Aiden interrupted. 150 knights, especially in armor, could never fit at a table this size. But it's a nice story. There was even a character named Kay, a minor one. For a second, he and Rick looked at each other. Then Aiden stood up and kissed his father on the cheek. Can I go, Dad? I'm not really hungry. Rick waited until the boy had left before allowing himself to laugh at the stunned Crane. What is it, Rick? He asked wearily. I like your son, Crane. He's a normal 12-year-old kid. We'll get along. I sincerely hope you're joking. Crane allowed himself to relax. He's an intelligent young man, but the shock of his first death hasn't worn off yet. Besides, you were right about the hormones. I consulted with the doctors. A slight infantilism in his behavior was inevitable. Rick nodded. He was walking on a knife's edge and knew it perfectly well. Aiden Crane, who, according to his father, was unaware of their conversations, was openly mocking him by playing the role of a child, which he, of course, no longer was. We're going to be friends, Rick said, pouring himself more wine. Chapter 10. The Master of Immortality greeted the morning in his real office, not in the showily modest little room, nor on the demonstratively open roof. This office, hidden deep underground, resembled the command bridge of a cruiser. Crane did indeed copy the strict, functional style of the military ships on which he had spent his youth. Once, 200 years ago, he had dreamed of commanding such a vessel. His current activity might have seemed more than strange. Leaning back in his chair, he was drawing. A light pen glided across the screen, leaving thin, multicolored strokes. Gradually, something familiar began to emerge from the chaos of lines, resembling a human face seen from an impossible angle, as if an ant were trying to discern a person through a colored prism. There, Crane said, setting the pen aside. He shifted his gaze to a side screen. There, on the yellow sand, stood Rick and the Ursid. A minute ago, they had been fighting. Now, Rick was taking off his armor, carefully, segment by segment, placing it on the sand. Next to his image, a red dot glowed, a mental sensor signaling an extreme level of emotional intensity. Zoom in. Give me audio. Crane rolled his chair over to the screen. The cameras had already brought Rick's face into close-up. What are you up to, kid? Crane asked himself. Why did you set the scourge on us? Rick asked, pulling off the last segment of armor. The Ursid watched his movements intently. Its strange, diamond-shaped pupils narrowed into slits. Tactics. We were trying to adopt your method. Divide and conquer. You didn't have time. No. As unhurriedly as he had removed the armor, Rick pulled his white shirt over his head. He stretched. Steel muscles rolled under his skin. Ursid, you said you were a consultant to the Scourge in their war for the TriStar system. Maybe you even participated in the landings? Perhaps. The Ursid spread its paws slightly. The index finger on its left paw was missing, which made it look a bit more like a human hand. I'm from there, Ursid, from the TriStar system. They were bickering sisters, but they never coveted other worlds. We were on the edge of the sector, and the scourge hit us. Funny, the Ursid said. There were too many of them. They just crushed our defenses. The cruisers from Earth didn't make it in time. The children and some of the women were loaded onto cargo ships. We had a good merchant fleet. Most of them made it to Aethel. 200 million freeloaders, Ursid. They hated us on Aethel. Other worlds didn't accept us. Our fathers died fighting those frogs. Not the most cheerful way to go. And the TriStar system was scorched with meson bombs. There was no other choice. Now those planets are useless to anyone. A buffer zone. Rick fell silent. He ran a hand over his chin. You know, I cried when the last Scourge world burned. I cried because I didn't get my revenge in time. Took too long to grow up. I am forbidden to kill you, the Ursid said. Julian Crane needs you. I know. Ursid, your mother ate grass and bathed in hot water. Your father closed the ranks. Your children dig ditches in the fields. Claws extended from the Ursid's fingers. Its voice became thin, like the song of a flute. You are taking a great risk, human. Even duty does not cancel honor.